So we are continuing our lecture on the reality of Al-Ain. And to summarize, for those that didn't attend last week, I had gone over 3 topics. Number 1 was the history of the concept of Al-Ain in pre-Islam. And I mentioned this is a almost universal concept that is found in what other cultures, guys? Quick quiz. Yeah, and I want some names. Sumerians, very good. What else? Romans, what else? Ancient Egyptians. Should I give one more? The Greeks as well. Okay, so all of this and more. The Akkadians as well and others. Ancient Babylon. So we find that the notion of the evil eye is universal pre-Islam. Then we mentioned the second part, which is the Quranic evidences. And what did we conclude about the Quranic evidences? Implicit, not explicit. Every verse that is in the Quran, you can interpret it as evil eye, and you can interpret it as something else. An angry eye, like looking at you in anger, or jealousy, which is something different than the evil eyes we're going to come to. Then we mentioned 7 or 8 ahadith, which are crystal clear. Al-Ainu Haqq is the most obvious one. And in Sahih Bukhari and Sahih Muslim, multiple incidents where the Prophet ﷺ is saying, evil eye has afflicted, do ruqyah, protect your children from the evil eye. So we have multiple ahadith in this regard. Jayyid. That was last week. Now let us now move on to the next section. What has been the interpretation of Muslim scholars? Let's begin with Ahl Sunnah, Sunni scholars. Obviously, Ahl Sunnah, because they prioritize ahadith, the vast majority of them, this is the default, they have affirmed the reality of the evil eye. And there are so many quotations, we can go on and on. And Nawawi says that in these ahadith, there is the affirmation of the Amrul Ain, the reality of Al-Ain. وَأَنَّهَا قَوِيَّةُ الضَّرَرِ. And that it is powerful in its harm. Its harm is very powerful. So An-Nawawi is a mainstream scholar, he's saying this. And you have Ibn Hajar al-Asqalani in his commentary, also similar. And Ibn al-Qayyim has an entire section in his book Ad-Da' wa Dawa. He has an entire section about the dangers of Al-Ain and the reality of Al-Ain. And he says that Al-Ain is like an arrow that comes from the soul of the one who has jealousy. And it targets the one that is the object of jealousy. And sometimes that arrow of the Ain afflicts the target, and sometimes it misses that target. So if it hits the target and there's no protection, then the arrow enters and causes harm. And if there is protection, then it is possible that the arrow is deflected or the arrow is going to have minimal impact. So he's giving a metaphor like the bow and arrow. And he says that Al-Ain is like an arrow from the soul. And it will be launched from the one who has hasad to the object of the hasad. And it is possible that it misses. So he has it and nothing happens. And it's possible it hits. And if it hits, the man can have piety. So by protection, he means dhikr of Allah and piety. And it can completely deflect or it can be minimized. So this is something that hardly any mainstream scholar, basically within Sunnism, by and large, you have the default understanding that Ain is a reality. Now, are there any other opinions within Sunnism? I tried to find alternatives, and the only alternatives that I found within Sunnism are people that either interpreted Al-Ain to be nothing but jealousy, or they said that they attempted to minimize the reality of Al-Ain without denying it. I did not find any mainstream Sunni scholar that completely negated Al-Ain. But you have voices that are diminishing its impact. Either saying, for example, that Al-Ainu Haqq, yes, meaning jealousy can harm. Not that there's another concept that is going to supernaturally impact you. Al-Ainu Haqq, beware of Al-Ain, mean beware of the jealous eye. Because when you're jealous, you do things. Or there are people that basically diminish it to almost being non-effective. And names in this category include the famous Rashid Rida. In our times, Dr. Tariq al-Suwaidan, if you listen, he has many lectures on Al-Ain, and you can listen to what he has to say. I don't want to misquote him, but it's clear that he's not following the dominant view. He has a minority view. Also, Shaykh Akram Nadawi in England as well, a great scholar of our times, and others of that nature, that they're not negating the hadith. They are Sunnis, they affirm the hadith, but they interpret it in a way as to basically make it not something you guys should be worried about, diminishing the impact of this concept and claiming that the bulk of the reality of how people perceive it is superstition. That's not what the hadith came to affirm. In other words, what this group is predominantly saying is that mainstream people have exaggerated this concept. Not that it doesn't exist, but even if it exists, it's something very rare, or it's something obscure, or it's something that even if it's there, we don't change our lives because of it. And all of them, this category, are critical of how easily people blame their problems on Al-Ain. And because of that, they themselves don't do anything to fix their problems, because they say this is because of Al-Ain. So they're frustrated, this group, they're frustrated at what they believe to be a quick psychological fix that is actually damaging. Okay, so this is a group of scholars that they accept the hadith. They're not saying the hadith is not authentic because it's Bukhari and Muslim. I mean, if you're Sunni, then basically you have a big issue if you say it's not authentic. But they are interpreting it in ways that would diminish its impact in the modern world. So this is within mainstream Sunnism. Of course, as for outside of Sunnism, I found it very interesting. You actually have different views. So some non-Sunnis, especially some of the Mu'tazila, and of course the Mu'tazila are a group that they have a higher bar of accepting hadith. They don't accept a hadith except with a number of criterion, mutawatir, something of this nature. So a number of the Mu'tazila, Al-Jubba'i, Al-Sharif, Abu Hashim, Abu Al-Qasim Al-Balkhi, these are icons of the Mu'tazili creed. They basically said there's no such thing as Al-Ain because we don't think these ahadith are authentic. We don't believe the Prophet said this. So they rejected that notion of Al-Ain. And of course, in our times as well, you have that type of thought. And again, guys, I'm being factual here. I want to educate you. When I quote names, it's not an endorsement, obviously, right? The point of education, you should be aware. And I have a different philosophy. I don't want to censor other ideas from you. You just do a simple Google or YouTube, all the ideas are going to come up. I don't believe in censorship. In our time and age, it doesn't make any sense. So when I quote you, it's not an endorsement. You should be aware. And we should be brave enough to discuss who says what's wrong with that. And okay, let's see what other scholars said, what other intellectuals said. We can disagree, and then we also have to discuss what is the verdict of disagreeing. We'll get there. So another famous thinker of our times, many of the Arabs know him, Dr. Adnan Ibrahim. He has many lectures on Al-Ain, and in all of them, he is absolutely dismissive. He says these are not authentic ahadith. I don't think the Prophet said them. So he rejects that the Prophet ever said something of this nature, and obviously because of this, when you don't believe the Prophet said it, then you will reject their existence. So he says that they do not, there's no such reality at all. This is simply a popular superstition, and he says Islam has come to abolish superstition. It's not come to affirm it. So you have this group over there. And this group is different than the previous category, because the previous category affirmed the authenticity of the ahadith, but then they interpret it in a way that is slightly different. Whereas this category does not even accept hadith. They don't, so the conclusion might be similar, but the way they got there is very different. And this is very important, because when you judge somebody, you judge the methodology and not just the final verdict. In Islam, you judge how they got to their position and not just the final position. And then I found this very interesting. There are groups of people who are not fans of Sunni hadith, yet still they affirmed Al-Ain. I found this very interesting. There are groups of people they're not Sunni and they don't accept hadith, but they did affirm the Ain. Why? Because they believed Al-Ain is something that is a spiritual impact between the souls that has nothing to do with theology and religion. It is So this group of people, basically they're saying, just like we have the physical world, we also have a spiritual world. And in the spiritual world, there are mechanisms of impacting the souls that are causal and direct in nature. It has nothing to do with superstition. It's the soul impacting the soul in the world of the souls. So it's nothing to do with religion, it's simply a physical, well, not quite physical, but you get my point. It's causal is the better word, right? In other words, it's not superstitious from them. From this perspective, it is the alamul arwah, the world of the souls interacting amongst itself. And in this category are a number of prominent thinkers. Number one amongst them is Ibn Sina, Avicenna. Ibn Sina was no Sunni at all. Ibn Sina was a through and through philosopher. Ibn Sina was a philosoph, and he doesn't really care about what hadith says. Yet in his book, Danishnameh, he has an entire section on al-ayn, and also in his kitab al-shifa, he mentions that the ayn is the power that one soul has, one evil soul, a nafs al-khabith, has over another soul. So he's not looking at it from a spiritual perspective per se, a dini perspective, a religious perspective. He believes a corrupt, a bad soul has the power to harm a good soul. And that is in the world, just like a thug has the power to beat you up physically, right? So he believes a bad soul is like a thug. And in the world of the souls, it has the power to impact you via this notion called al-ayn. Is that clear, right? So he's not really bringing Islam, no. It's his worldview of cosmology and of the souls. And there are other people like this as well. By the way, interestingly enough, again, for the Pakistanis in the audience, I mentioned Adnan Ibrahim. In the Pakistani world, we have other thinkers like Ghamidi Saab. And again, I'm respectful here. I'm mentioning their names with respect. I have no agenda here. You should be aware. It is what it is. And Ustad Ghamidi, Dr. Ghamidi, he also has a similar view, believe it or not, in which he believes that the ayn is not a religious concept, but it is true from the spiritual concept. Just like Ibn Sina, exact same thing. It is true from the world of the souls. And his view is that the religion didn't come to talk to us about this, but it still is true because the world of the souls impacts each other, and the notion of how it impacts, the popular culture has called it al-ayn, and he says that the religion is not coming to affirm or deny, it's simply telling you that it is also there. So, bottom line, that the mainstream view has been to affirm the reality of al-ayn, and that the soul can harm another soul because of the jealousy in that soul. However, as I said, some thinkers within Sunnism, they had a slightly different view. And in my analysis, Wallahu ta'ala alam, those thinkers within Sunnism, and of course you must know this, I have these are all my friends and colleagues, Dr. Tariq Suwaidan, Shaykh Akram Nadwi. I was just with the both of them recently, last month, both of them, and I respect and admire them. They are friends and colleagues. I shouldn't even say colleagues, they are mentors of mine. I look up to them. Yet I politely, respectfully don't agree with their analysis. With respect, utmost respect, and I want also for us to be getting to this level, that it's okay to have different opinions. One of our problems that we have is the narrow-minded sectarianism that exists. To the best of my knowledge, no theologian in our tradition has ever said, believing in al-ayn is a part of our theology. If you don't believe in it, you become a kafir. I don't know any theologian that said this. And if you know, please educate me. So, I believe in al-ayn. But if you find a great alim within Sunnism, a great mujtahid within Sunnism, who affirms the hadith, but then he goes, for example, one of these, I forgot, I think Shaykh Tariq Suwaidan, they basically say, al-ayn here means the potential that jealousy can harm somebody else. Al-aynu haqq, it is true. The one who has ayn can harm you. So beware of al-ayn, because the jealous guy in his rage does what nobody else does. So he doesn't reject the hadith. He simply has a different interpretation of it, right? So as long as people affirm the Qur'an and the Sunnah, and they have different interpretations, even if we disagree, we should be mature enough to allow for disagreement. Again, We have to move forward from the petty narrow-mindedness that you must agree with every analysis that I have. We have to differentiate between what is called the usul of the deen, the foundations of the deen, in which no two opinions are allowed, and between the furu' or the subsidiary matters. The usul of the deen, Allah is one, the Prophet is the Rasul, He is Khatamul Anbiya, the Qur'an is Wahi. Anybody disagrees about the usul, that is no toleration, no toleration. We will strongly disagree and we will pronounce verdicts immediately. And then you have the secondary issues. And these secondary issues, how do you understand the sifat of Allah? Does it mean this? Does it mean that? These are issues you find spectrum. We must learn to tolerate without animosity, without hatred. These are people, their lives, their track records are defending Islam. I'm sorry to be blunt here. Look at what Tariq Suwaidan has done for the ummah in terms of da'wah and whatnot. If you find an opinion you don't agree with, okay, Jazakallah khair, and move on. And same with Shaykh Akram Nadawi, same with others of these nature. We have to learn to look at the broader picture rather than become petty. So, and I say this publicly and maybe one day I'll reach them as well. I love them immensely and I politely and respectfully disagree. That's what I want us to do as well. I believe al-ayn is true. Because the interpretation they're doing, I don't find it to be convincing. When the Prophet sees a child and he says, read Ruqyah, this is al-ayn, you clearly then are seeing that al-ayn has an impact. It's not just hasad, right? It's an impact that you see in the reality. So, Allahu Alam, I respect their opinions, but I politely disagree, and I think that we should stick with the majority opinion because the reason why is very simple. The sheer quantity of a hadith is too much. We have explicit, authentic hadith in Bukhari, Muslim, Abu Dawud, Ibn Nisa'i, in Muslim, Imam Ahmad, and then we also have the lived reality that al-ayn has been diagnosed by many people who are doing ruqyah. Many people who do ruqyah, they see this reality with their eyes. And they can sense it, and they can treat it, and they can cure it. So I do believe in the reality of al-ayn, but I also fully agree with Shaykh Tariq Suwaidan and Shaykh Akram and all of these great giants when they say that unfortunately too many people blame their own shortcomings on an imaginary al-ayn that doesn't exist in their lives. This, I will tell you, every raqi will agree with me here. Every true raqi will agree with what I'm saying. That one of the reasons why, in my opinion, some of our great ulama in our times have rejected al-ayn is because so many of our own ummah is self-declaring themselves as failures. I can't succeed in my exam because al-ayn. I'm not getting a job because al-ayn. I'm not getting married because al-ayn. And the reason they're not getting a job is they're not trying hard enough. The reason they're not passing the exam is because they're not studying hard enough, etc., etc. So when these great ulama have seen every second family blames ayn for their problems, then the natural reaction has been, you know what, we need to teach these people al-ayn is not what they think it is. And I understand that sentiment. But there is a middle path, and that middle path is to literally do what I'm doing right now, which is to say they are correct in claiming we have a endemic problem of blaming everything on al-ayn. Especially with utmost love and respect, our sisters. May Allah protect them and bless them and reward them. Our sisters, every second thing, nazar lag gaye. Nazar lag gaye. This is al-ayn. And we have to explain to them, no, 99% of the time has nothing to do with anything supernatural. You know, the food came out bad because you didn't cook it properly. You know, koi nazar nahi lage, nothing happened there. You know what I'm saying? You didn't add enough salt or whatever. It is what it is. You just blame everything on al-ayn. Understandably, it will generate a reaction from the clergy class. For some of them, like, guys, stop this. It's foolish. So we have to then be very careful in this regard that we don't read in too much in this reality. Now, there's one other question before we move on. And inshallah, we will have a part 3. This is a very deep topic, so we're not going to finish today. It's a lot of topics today. And that is, one of these thinkers said something that I'm going to ask you. one of these thinkers who wants to diminish al-ayn, and again I respect them immensely, I respect them. One of them said, one of the proofs that there's no such thing as al-ayn is the fact that rich and powerful people, if al-ayn were true, all you needed to do, if a politician is elected and the other party doesn't want him to be elected, all they need to do is to get all of the people together and stare at that politician with al-ayn. Or the cricket team, let's just say, okay? The basketball team, the football team. You don't want the other team to win? Khalas, hire some evil people and say, khalas, give them baddua, nazar, give them al-ayn. And that doesn't happen. It does not happen in the real world. Politicians are elected even though people hate them, right? Things happen, cricket matches, whatever happen, it's tangibly, observably, demonstrably shown that al-ayn is not as, pernicious, as everywhere as people want to make it out to be. And so they say this shows it doesn't exist. And the response, so then the question they say is, clearly when this doesn't happen, this is a negation of the existence of al-ayn. What would you say to this? How would you reply to them? Go ahead, Talha, bismillah. How would you reply? Okay, so one interpretation Ustad gives here is that this comes from ajab, which is astonishment. And astonishment typically is not going to be found in somebody that is wanting to dispel a politician or get rid of a politician. So like in Yusuf alayhi salam's case, the astonishment would come when he's going to Egypt in a different land and not when he's in his own land here. This is one interpretation, but it doesn't explain the hasad though. How about the other issue of hasad? Because what if you say, how about the hasad, getting the politician out of hasad? So hasad is the grudge of you not having what the person has. This is a key point here. And generally speaking, listen to me carefully, we do not have hasad for people that are not directly related to us. We might want what they want in a generic way, but we don't have overpowering hasad for them. That's very difficult to have. Let me give you a simple example. What's the billionaire, what's his name? Bill Gates, whatever, okay? Yani, all of us would love to have Bill Gates' money. But frankly, none of us here has hasad for Bill Gates. Our hearts are not burning with jealousy. We're going to sleep. Wow, why is he getting that? No, it doesn't work that way. Because hasad typically only comes, and it is so strange, but it only comes against people that you are very closely associated with. And sadly, wallahi, it's so sad. The hasad is for something utterly trivial, not Bill Gates' wealth. No, cut off 10 zeros, and if your cousin gets a fraction more than you, hasad will come there. Your brother, your uncle gets a little bit, that's where hasad will come. Right? SubhanAllah, this is how shaitan works here. So I don't agree with this hypothetical scenario. That how come ayn doesn't happen for a president, for a basketball team? It doesn't work that way. You don't have ayn for people that you're not interacting with. Ayn is coming from, we're going to come to this point here, ayn is coming from primarily hasad and secondarily from ujub or from astonishment, ta'ajjub, you're astonished at that. Primarily it is coming from hasad. And hasad, what is hasad? It is an overpowering envy. It is an envy that overtakes the heart. It is an envy that you're going to sleep at night and you are burning inside. How come, she is so beautiful? How come he is so wealthy? By the way, in women, hasad is primarily for beauty or healthy marriages, and in men, primarily hasad is for fame and wealth, okay? Understand, Allah created us differently. In women, hasad is primarily directed to two things: good marriage and beauty. And in men, primarily hasad is directed towards two things: wealth and fame. Okay? And this is why the people who do ruqyah will tell you, and even sihr, and we're going to come to this next week. I'm tantalizing you. Next week we'll discuss the difference between ruqyah and between ayn and sihr. This is not this week. Most of sihr and most of ayn, it comes in these four scenarios that I just mentioned: beauty, good marriage, wealth, and fame. most of it, because this is where it is coming from. That how come he has a good car? How come he has a good house? Or how come, she has the successful this and that? That hasad will lead to al-ayn. So I don't agree with this hypothetical situation at all. Jayyid. Next point, our final point today. Let's do the Q&A to the end. Our final point for today, and then we'll continue next week. This is a very, very difficult question, guys. I have thought about this question literally for more than a decade. I don't have a solid answer, I'm telling you from now. I have asked more than 6 or 7 specialists, and each one of them gives me a slightly different answer. So the question is as follows. Listen to this. This is research I'm doing, and if you have quotations from scholars or if you have an answer, teach it to me, and I will happily mention it next week and ascribe it to you. The question is as follows. So if al-ayn is true, which we believe, how does al-ayn go from one body to another? Like, what is the mechanism of transferring al-ayn? How does it go? What is because there must be a tangible power. There must be something that takes from one person to another and causes a problem in the other person. In my research, I found 2 opinions on this, and I don't have a conclusive answer which one is valid. Wallahu a'lam. The first and the primary answer, I've already quoted you Ibn al-Qayyim, and other scholars have the same point of view. Ibn al-Arabi, the Maliki Ibn al-Arabi, not the Sufi Ibn al-Arabi. Ibn al-Arabi said, when a person has al-ayn, Allah creates something in their soul, and that creation, it basically comes out of that soul. That spark comes out of the soul of the one that has al-ayn or hasad, and it then attaches itself to the one that is the subject of the envy. And if it is attached, it's going to have an impact, and if it's deflected, it will not have an impact. The same notion is mentioned by Ibn al-Qayyim as well. The arrow issue, he mentions it, that ayn is like an arrow. It comes out and it goes there. And Ibn Hajar also writes the same thing, that in his Fath al-Bari, he says, some people have a type of spiritual poison that goes, this is him saying, this is literally saying, that goes from the eyes through the air to the one he is jealous of. And this is actually going back to Ptolemy and others of ancient Greece and Greek and Rome, in which they literally assumed that ayn is like laser rays. And there's even diagrams in their books, in the books of the Greek philosophers. There's even diagrams. That's where the ayn talisman comes from. The eye. There's even they thought that the soul emits a type of, they wouldn't call it a laser ray, they would say a type of, what would they say? A light, an energy. The soul emits a type of impact, and it latches onto the other person. In that latching, if the other soul has protection, it is possible it's going to be deflected, or it's going to be minimized, or it's going to go deep inside. Only Allah Azza wa Jal will be the one who will decide that. And Ibn al-Qayyim also says the same thing, that the evil eye harms by the effects of the nafs al-khabitha. The nafs al-khabitha. Okay, this is one opinion. The other opinion is that the evil eye, the ayn, is related to jinns. And when a person has hasad, the hasad is like energy to the evil jinn. The hasad gives a pathway and an incentive, just like, so for example, when you recite the Qur'an, when you do dhikr, the angels come and they attend your company. The opposite is also true. When you are full of evil, the marada, the shayateen, the khabith of the jinn, they come towards you, right? So when your soul becomes evil, the shayateen will come towards you. Just like when the soul becomes pure, the angels come. So the second opinion is that when the hasad overpowers you, you are becoming a magnet for who? For the evil jinn. And that fuels the evil jinn, energizes them. It's like a battery. It energizes them to then latch on to that person. And so, according to this opinion, al-ayn is the fuel that your hasad or your ujub, we're going to talk about hasad and ujub next week. Al-ayn is the fuel that the jinni gets, the evil jinni gets, in order to then affect your life. And so that jinn then has an incentive and is empowered by you to then go and harm the other person's life. And between these two opinions, personally, I'm very sympathetic to the second one. Personally, I'm very sympathetic to the second one. I don't see any evidence that the soul has some power in and of itself to harm another soul. I don't see any evidence in the Qur'an and Sunnah that the soul has some type of light rays or laser beams that can harm the other soul. What it makes sense to me, and it's just an opinion, guys, what it makes sense to me, which makes complete sense in my opinion, that this is the marada or the evil jinnis. As you're aware, we talked about jinns many times. As you're aware, jinns are everywhere. And the evil jinns are everywhere. And when you do evil, in places of evil, the evil jinn come. Where there's gambling, where there's alcohol, where there's fahisha, the evil jinn come. We know this. The shayateen, the angels go away. Similarly, where a person's soul becomes corrupt, a person's soul is full of kibr and of hasad, it's gonna attract the evil jinn. And the evil jinn are looking for an excuse to enter our world. So this person's hasad allows them to make that transition, and they then attach and latch on to the other person. And wallahu alam, I find that to be very sensible, but in the end of the day, it's just an opinion. And one of my teachers, Shaykh Dr. he writes that all of these opinions are from ijtihad, and all of them have points of merit and points of criticism, and Allah did not ask us to know how al-ayn works. And I also agree with this. Final point, and then we'll conclude for today and then come back next week. Next week we will discuss the difference between ayn and sihr, the two categories of ayn, the jealousy and the ujub ayn, and then the symptoms of ayn. Very important topic. And then how to protect yourself from ayn. We'll try to do all of that. If not, we'll do another week after that. Final point here. Some scholars have mentioned that al-ayn can also come from the jinn to humans, and maybe even from the animals to humans. So some scholars have mentioned this, that al-ayn is not just a human phenomenon. And Ibn al-Qayyim is very clear on this. In his opinion, this is very explicit. Ibn al-Qayyim says, it is possible that the jinn can also give ayn to the humans, and it is possible that even some animals can give ayn to the humans. And other scholars have also mentioned this as well. The evidence is that they quote beyond the scope of our class, but I found them to be ambiguous. You can interpret them different ways, and I did not find them to be definitive. And if we open this door, Allahu alam, it's even more problematic as it is. As it is, we want to direct people to not blame everything on al-ayn. If we say to them, the world of the jinn can give you ayn, and there's no evidence to say this, I think we're actually opening up a bigger door than we need to. With respect, I don't find any evidence for this. And the jinn already want to harm us by waswasa. The jinn, we know they are enemies. Allah says in the Qur'an. And we know that Iblis has hasad of us. But Iblis did not give ayn to Adam alayhi salam. Hasad is not exactly the same as al-ayn. So Iblis's hasad did not give ayn. So I would rather say, Allah knows best, we leave it to Allah, but there doesn't seem to be any explicit evidence to open this door. So let us restrict it to human beings. And then inshallah we'll pause here and come back next week bi'idhnillahi ta'ala and talk about the symptoms. How do you know you have ayn? And then how do you protect yourself from ayn and the difference between ayn and sihr. Wa jazakumullah khair. Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh.